Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I, kind of like Martin Burkham, tend to tell people that, look, if you get really strong on the weighted chin-ups, I promise you, no matter what else you're doing for your biceps, that they're not going to be lagging behind the rest of your body. They're going to be pretty decent. And I had a viewer say, hey, I'm not so sure about that because I'm 6'1", 168 and lanky, but I can do 5 reps on chin-ups with 100 pounds of plates hanging around my waist. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing. We're going to skill up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about that, because you do see people who have examples like that. And what people need to remember, people claim that, but we need to actually see what a person's doing when they say that. Someone might think they're doing good, but they're not doing full range of motion. They're doing partials on the chin-ups. And still, either way, even if he's doing a partial, that's a respectable amount of weight. I think most of us could agree, even someone doing partial reps who's pulling up 268 pounds, because 100 pounds was his body weight, for 5 reps, that's pretty decent. That should build some respectable bicep size. But a couple things that people need to remember when we go down that road is, number one, we're talking about relative to the rest of your body. You're talking about being balanced. And we're talking about someone who isn't on a lot of drugs. Or even if you are on a lot of drugs, you need to be comparing yourself to someone who's using similar amounts to you. Meaning there's a lot of bad examples given out there for people, and then they don't understand why they don't look a certain way, because they're comparing themselves to people who, with certain genetic gifts, or a lot of drugs. We'll get into that later. Now, as far as this goes, honestly, I can promise you, as a person saying this, you might have some muscle dysmorphia, or you're comparing yourself incorrectly, because at 168, at 6'1", your whole body's going to be kind of small. But the fact that you're that strong on chin-ups tells me that you're not in balance. Like, you might be saying, well, my biceps still look small. They're tiny. But they might be in comparison to other people out there. But in comparison to the rest of your frame, I promise you, if you're that strong on chin-ups, it's not your biceps that are lagging. Your biceps and your lats could very well be your absolute best body parts in proportion to everything else. And that's what people need to understand when it comes to lagging body parts. You might be perceiving a body part as being lagging when it's your whole frame, it's your whole structure that's lagging. Because again, at 6'1", 168, that's not big by any standards. And if this same individual were to go ahead and fill out and slowly start gaining weight while maintaining that strength that he has on there, his biceps would probably fill out along with other muscles. Meaning anyone who's that strong, I promise you their biceps aren't lagging compared to the rest of their body. They're probably decently big. And if the guy's like, well, my arms look small, it might not be your biceps that are small. It could be your triceps. And think about that for a moment, because if someone's 6'1", 168, they don't have a whole lot of muscle on their frame. And they might be strong on one exercise, but they might be weak on their overall pressing, might not be doing much volume. And when you look at the arm, the tricep, everyone knows this, so the tricep makes up 2/3 of the mass of the upper arm. So if your triceps are lagging, your arms are going to look small, even when your biceps are pretty decent, even if your biceps are actually better than a lot of the rest of your upper body. And a point to consider, because something has to be lagging. If someone's 168 and 6'1", there has to be places on their body that don't have a lot of muscle, because as he said, he's lanky, and that is going to be fairly lanky, particularly for someone who lifts. But the biceps are not going to be what's causing the lankiness. Now, having long arms, because a guy being 6'1", a lot of people know this, if you have long arms, you have to put more muscle on your arms in order for them to look proportionate. Guys with little short arms can have sometimes a 16 or 17-inch arm, and everyone thinks their arm is huge. And a guy with longer arms might have 18-inch arms, and they look a little smaller than that guy's. It's about proportion and relative size of muscles as they spread over your frame. And that's, again, just illusion created that people don't always see when a person's in isolation. Because that's why one reason shorter guys, or guys with shorter arms and things, oftentimes will look bigger than they are in a camera or a photo, and then you meet them in real life and realize sometimes how short and stocky they are. That, yeah, they're big for their height, they're enormous for their height, but when you compare them in the real world to other people, they might not seem as big. And you see a lot of that over in the bodybuilding world. Most of your top bodybuilders are relatively short. They are well under 6 foot. And when you meet them in person, you start to realize that. And then you stand them next to some of these strongman competitors, and they look tiny. They look absolutely tiny next to them. But if you look at isolated photos, you wouldn't necessarily realize that. So that's part of the problem there, is understanding the relative proportions on your body and how your limb lengths and things can make something look smaller. But also, you don't necessarily have just tiny biceps if you're way, way underweight for your height. For a lifter, at least. I don't mean for the general population. 168 at 6'1" is perfectly healthy. It's a healthy body weight. But it's not going to be carrying a lot of muscle mass. So in that case, this person's biceps and lats might very well and probably are their best body part, unless they're just, short stroking their reps and not going very far. Again, without observing, it's hard to tell. The other thing that people need to realize is that so many people end up comparing themselves to other people out there. And when your standards come from the internet, and they come from people who you're looking at in different photos, who have good lighting, maybe they're in isolation, maybe they're fairly short, maybe they have a really good frame, and they use a lot of drugs while claiming natural, it can skew your personal standards of what's acceptable. It can skew your personal standards of what it means to be fit, what it means to be muscular, what it means to look good. The internet is bad about that. And I think in general it's bad for people's self-esteem in a lot of ways. And some people will say, well, it motivates me to do better. But at a certain point you got to say, but what is better? What's better mean? Meaning, if you think that you have to look like a certain person online to look good or to look better, maybe it motivating you to improve yourself and be better might not be a good thing. If it's pushing you towards a standard that is going to require you to use hefty amounts of drugs to achieve that goal, maybe that's not in your best interest. Maybe it's not in your best interest. And I'm not saying whether it is or not. That's for each person to decide. I mean, people need to figure that out for themselves. What risk are they willing to take with their own body as a person to achieve a goal? And they have to ask themselves, is this really worth it to me? Is this worth it to me? Because again, they might seem like it is, and then they find out later maybe it isn't. And and that's the biggest problem. I think we see a lot of body dysmorphia as a result of what we see on the internet, because people need to understand a lot of the people online who push themselves to certain extremes got to those extremes because they have body dysmorphia. And unfortunately, a lot of those people aren't happy with their results, even though you might look at their results and think, hey, those are fantastic. That person could very well have only pushed themselves that far and be willing to use that many drugs or dedicate their life to that because they personally have a body image disorder. And the sad part is, a lot of times people are looking up to those people and don't realize that person doesn't look up to themselves. They oftentimes can't even see their own achievement. So the thing that everyone thinks, wow, they've done is so fantastic, they don't get to enjoy it because they can't see it personally. They still think they have a tiny bicep. And here's where that gets really tricky. People need to understand a lot of the people you see online who you're thinking, oh, they have great arms. Sometimes it's genetics combined with drugs. And if you don't have their genetics and you're not doing the drugs they're doing, you're going to struggle to have what they have there at their arm. And it's not necessarily their training that's doing that. You just have an unobtainable standard. Where it gets even worse, synthol and site enhancement, various forms of site enhancement are absurdly common in the physique world, now even among people who don't compete. So again, if you watch Boston Lloyd explains a lot of this, and he's right about it. You'd be surprised how many guys out there who run around claiming natural, who you think their arm training is how they got their arms. You'd be surprised how many of them are shooting stuff directly into their arms. And it doesn't just have to be a site enhancement oil. Some people are injecting their gear directly into their arms. Boston Lloyd does it. You'd be surprised. Like if you guys watched that documentary with Dave Crossan, he said from his experience knowing tons of competitive bodybuilders that most bodybuilders cite. Most of them do. It's normal. They pin a lot of the stuff they use directly into the muscles they want to grow just for the swelling effect in the scar tissue. So, a lot of times people see people on the internet and they have a standard of what they think is acceptable for a big arm, and then they see these standards and they feel like they're small because they've been given a false standard, a false expectation. Whereas in where they might be, if you were to ask the average person walking down the street and they see them, they think that person has muscular arms. They think they've got a muscular chest. They think they look in shape. They look better than the average person, and most people would recognize it. But that same person, they go look at internet standards, and then they're going to down on themselves, and they're going to feel like garbage about themselves when they start comparing themselves to all these people online. And that's one of the negative things that this industry does is the fact that it promotes oftentimes unobtainable results for the average person. And then people oftentimes, some people use it as motivation, but other times they feel bad about themselves. And it can become an obsession and a trap. And that's one of the negative sides of it. If people are given unrealistic standards and then they feel bad about themselves and see themselves as tiny or small or out of shape when actually they're doing quite good. But you wouldn't know it based upon what you're seeing online and this whole illusion that's been created by the online fitness community. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.